My favourite by a landslide was definitely... Hey guys, welcome back to Francesca's Books. My name's Francesca, these are my books, and here we talk about all things thriller books. And today we're chatting about the books that I read in October. Does anyone else just drink iced coffee till the absolute death? Like, till it is so cold that your fingers go numb from holding it? Because that's me right now. So October was an incredibly busy month. I am not actually sure how I've managed to read this many books in October. It's a lot less than normal, so I only read 7 books this month. I normally read 8 or 9, so only a little bit less than normal actually. But I, of course, did my trip to America, my bookish trip. That vlog is now live here if you want to go and see everything I got up to, but that was a 10-day trip, and while I did read a couple of books, like, it's not the same because, like, you want to be out, you want to be exploring, and when I say exploring, I mean exploring the bookshops. I also got the keys to my new house, which is very exciting. I'm doing it up before I move in, so I'm still in my same setup, but of course, when I unhaul all my books and reset them back up in my new house, you guys are obviously going to be along for the ride. I'm going to vlog everything, and the books that I don't want and like unhaul, I'll be popping on my Vinted, so stay tuned for that as well. So without further ado, here are the books that I read in October and what I thought of them, and I'm going to caveat this immediately by saying it was a fantastic reading month. 5 stars. And to kick us off, we're going to dive into the first 5-star. The first book that I read in October, Listen for the Lie. So this follows Lucy, who years and years ago was accused of her best friend's unaliving. So she obviously left town, started up a new life, but now she's drawn back because there's a true crime podcaster in town. He basically reopens the case and she's like, I really don't want to go and deal with this, but like, I'm gonna have to. So she kind of sets it on herself to like actually work out who did the unaliving, and she kind of teams up with this podcaster. They have a bit of a weird relationship, but they're both working towards the same goal. And basically this is everything you could ever want in a thriller book. It was absolutely fantastic. It was an easy 5-star. I finished it and I was like, yeah, immediately 5-star. Like, there is no hesitation when I give a book 5-star. Like, it just is a 5-star. It's a feeling. So our FMC had a very troubled, very morally grey past, which was amazing. Love it when that happens with our FMCs. And this podcaster was like quite morally grey as well. Like, you don't really know what to make of him. So like, our 2 main characters were absolutely brilliant. So I did read some of this physically, and then I read some of it on audio, because I started reading it physically and everyone was like, you have to read this on audio. Like, this is the perfect book to read as an audiobook. So I kind of like dipped in and out of both. And I have to say, I did really enjoy the audiobook as well, because there's some segments in this book that are actually of the podcast that he's producing, and like, it has its own little jingle like at the start of the chapter, and I was like, yes. I feel like this book threw me in so many loops as well. Like, there were so many times when I was like, yeah, I've got it. I've literally figured it, and I hadn't. And my gut instinct from the beginning was absolutely wrong as well. So I'm definitely going to try and pick up some more books by this author. This is the first book of hers that I've picked up, but I have had my eye on it for a very long time, and it absolutely lived up to expectation. So next up, I read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore, and this was just like a really, really easy to read book that I picked up because I just wanted like the autumn vibes. But let me tell you, this cover looks super cute, super innocent. This book is not super cute or super innocent. I actually had a few people reply to me on my like Bookstagram whilst I was reading this, being like, I've not got to the thriller part yet. And I was like, I think I have missold this. This is literally just a romance book. That there is no thriller element in it. So it's basically a light-hearted rom-com set in the autumn time about this girl who inherits, kind of, is given the Pumpkin Spice Cafe in this really small town. She comes from the big city, she moves to the small town, she runs a cute little cafe, aka everybody's dream. And then of course she meets this guy, but I will say that the autumn vibes were immaculate in this. Like, with it being November now, this may be one for like next year. I mean, it's still kind of vibey, but it's very like in the run up to Halloween based. There's like a fall festival, there's like apple cider donuts or whatever they do in America. So I ended up giving it a 3.5. I did enjoy it, but it was just kind of like quite basic. It was quite insta love. They kind of just met and then hooked up, and it was all very nice and very flat kind of, but it was good at the same time. Like, I did enjoy it, and I did read it really, really quickly. I think this was like a 48-hour read. It was super, super enjoyable, but it's not groundbreaking. Like, I'm not gonna think about it all the time or remember it in that much detail, if that makes sense. However, guess which book I read next? The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, which is the follow-up to this book. But I have to say, I do feel like the concept of this one dragged me in more than it being the second book in the series. I was like, that was a very easy to read book, so this one will be too. But this concept follows this girl who owns the bookstore, and she finds these secret messages in the books. And then this guy, just getting about town, minded his own business, is like, I'll help you like figure out what's going on. So I thought there was going to be kind of like a thriller element, and while there was marginally more mystery than the first book, it was still very insta love and a very similar vibe. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I did enjoy it, probably not as much as the first one, which really surprised me, but it was still good. It was just still that very basic, insta-love concept that if that's what you're in the mood for, like these will absolutely hit the spot, and this one was just as spicy as the first one. So I would recommend both of these if you're after a palate cleanser that's like seasonal, definitely. Then I read Freida McFadden's latest book, The Boyfriend, and I have very, very mixed opinions on this. So this follows Sydney, who's very suspicious after there's been reports of a serial unaliver. She literally thinks, who could this be? I read this at the start of the month when it first came out, and the fact that I'm struggling to remember more than that about it is not setting this on a great tone, I'm not gonna lie. So I started this on audio. I was 10% in, and I honestly was debating DNFing it. And I never, ever, ever DNF books. Definitely not Freida McFadden books. It was the narration, I realised quite quickly, not the actual book, but I mean, it's got to be a little bit in the book for the narration to be that poor, if that makes sense. But it did significantly improve when I switched to the paperback and actually did read it physically. I don't think I'd have been able to get through the audio, honestly. But I will say my main takeaway from reading this, and this is a comment on Freida McFadden in general, why does she write women who hate themselves so damn much? Like, just write a woman who is empowered for once, please. This opens with our main character Sydney talking about her flabby arms and like pulling herself down, saying, oh, my arms are flabby, he won't like me because my arms are flabby. So I did end up really enjoying it, honestly, after all those comments. I did. It was good. It actually was one of Freida McFadden's better books, believe it or not. But I feel like I'm kind of comparing it to some of her most recent releases, like The Co-Worker and The Teacher, which were like, it was better than those, but it's not better than her like original, the stuff she's popular for, like The Housemaid and Never Lie. However, definitely managed expectations for this. It was a popcorn thriller. It was very easy to read, but that is the entire depth of it. I did give it 4 stars when I finished it, but maybe that's more like a 3.5 retrospectively, especially now having said my views out loud. Then I finished off B.A. Paris's backlist with The Prisoner, and I really like this one. B.A. Paris's books are always a little bit hit and miss for me. They're always either like really, really good or really, really bad, but I like this one. So the premise of this is about a woman whose life is flipped upside down because she is kidnapped. She awakens in a dark room, there's nothing there, there's literally a mattress on the floor, and she is terrified. However, the more you get to know this character, the more you're like, she's kind of happy to be there. Like, she's scared of her husband and she feels safer with her captor in this situation than she does with her husband. There's 2 points of view in this book, and for the longest time I wasn't sure whether they were the same person or not, and I'm not sure whether that was supposed to be obvious they were or obvious they weren't. Obviously not going to spoil it, but I was kind of questioning it, and then when I found out I was like, oh yeah, duh, obviously. So the first point of view is about this woman who's really down and out in life, and she meets a really like successful divorced businesswoman, and she ends up going to clean for her and she builds a relationship with her. And then you've got the point of view of the woman who is the prisoner. This was quite a shocking story and actually took a lot more turns than a normal thriller book does, and I feel like if that's not your thing, you may not like that. I personally loved it. However, with all B.A. Paris books, I think the titles are so misleading. Like, I want to sit down with this author and be like, hey, please let me rename your books. I can't really say much more than that, otherwise it's going to give away the whole prisoner element, but just kind of bear that in mind when you're reading. I'm also going to caveat with this one before you go off and read it that there was a hell of a lot of unaliving in this, like so much. Like every chapter someone else died. It was a lot even for me, I'm not gonna lie. And then the final twist, I'm not sure how I felt about it because there was so much over explaining of the twist, but yet it still didn't even really make that much sense. So I don't know. I did give this a 4. I think it's a solid thriller. I really enjoyed it, but I wouldn't like run to read it. It wouldn't be top of my list of recommendations. Next up is a book that I have been wanting to get my hands on for the longest time. So long. And I actually got it in America. They don't even have it in paperback in the UK, so we were having a good day that day, and it is The September House. So this follows our main character who lives in a house that's haunted or not haunted, to be discovered. But the conditions of the hauntings or goings on only happen in September. Like, there's a little bit of activity all year round, and in September it just ramps up. So our female main character lives in this house, and then her daughter Catherine wants to come and visit, but she wants to come in like the 3rd week of September, and the mum is like, absolutely not, like please don't come, and then she arrives anyway. I really, really enjoyed this book. The writing was absolutely fantastic, like to the point where I was like, I want to go back through this and like highlight everything. I was away when I was reading it, so I couldn't really do that, but I would read this again purely just to go through how beautiful the writing was in this. This is easily, by a landslide, the best horror book that I've read. I've read a few this year. I've really been trying to like branch out of thrillers. However, I do feel like because there was a little bit of a thriller element in it, in the dad's whereabouts was not disclosed and was kind of trying to be worked to in this book, I feel like maybe that's what swung me to make it one of my favourite horror books. I would probably say it's more a horror thriller, honestly. There's some great little twists as you go in this book as well. There was one major one which I did see coming and was just like so glad that the author wrote it this way. If you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about 100%, but it was fantastic. So I actually landed on a 4.5 for this one, and when I first finished it, I was like, it's a 5. It's absolutely a 5. But then a couple of hours later, I was like, do you know what? Let's actually be fair on this. It is a 4.5. However, I couldn't tell you what would make it up to that 5. I'm just not sure. And now I'm thinking about it, I did really like it. It didn't give me that 5-star feeling. I just feel like it's a fair 4.5. And then the final book that I read in October is Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier, and I've read Jar of Hearts by this author before, and I didn't love it. I think I gave it a 3.5 a couple of years ago, so because of that, I've never really dived back into this author's work, and that's probably an unfair assumption because she is a very popular author. However, I'd seen a lot of reviews about Little Secrets, especially recently, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna give that a go, and I read it on my Kindle. And oh my god, I am so glad that I did. 5-star. So this follows our main character, Marin, who loses her son at like a big market, like a big fair situation. He's led off by the hand by a stranger, and her life just basically changes forever. But it's not really a kidnapping story. There is so much more to it than that, and our FMC in this was just so incredibly morally grey. So wonderfully morally grey. My favourite type of female lead. The writing was absolutely phenomenal. The plot twists, absolutely brilliant. And the POV switches, chef's kiss. Brilliant. This book was so beautiful as well that I actually highlighted quite a lot of quotes like on my Kindle whilst I was going, and I don't normally do that. I'm not very like super sentimental, especially with things like that. I don't really highlight or annotate books, but this was just such an exception. And to prove my point, let me read you a couple. Who would have thought that the person you love and the person you feel safe with might not be the same person? And then another one, she could be a typical woman in a Nancy Meyers rom-com, except there's no romance and no comedy. Nobody's laughing. She's in a tragedy. A strange thing happens when you're going through something terrible. It's as if your body and mind separate and you cease to become a whole person. I just feel like she's just that, it's just beautiful. No other words. So those are the 7 books that I read in October. My favourite by a landslide was definitely Little Secrets, and my least favourite was probably The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, but I feel like I did have a really good month. I'm very excited to try and read a few more books in November than I did this month, but we will see how we go. There's going to be definitely some more like winter themed books coming up, so I cannot wait to share them with you. Let me know which was the best book that you read in October, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I cannot wait to see you next time.